Welcoming Nikolas Badminton.
Good afternoon. I've got a little bit of a better voice today. If people saw my talk on Tuesday evening, I was a little croaky. I spent a little bit of time recovering, so we're good. So, this is like the presentation that if any of you saw it on Tuesday, but on steroids. And if this is the first time you've seen the presentation, this is something that I've been working on for about 2.5 months, ever since Mike called me and invited me to come and talk. I'm very, very excited to come here. There's a lot of research and thinking, over 100 hours of really getting into what's happening in the world. I've been talking to a number of different people, everyone from like Calgary oil traders to biofuel lobbyists, all the way back to geologists and a number of people in the natural resources sector. So I don't work in the natural resources sector. I've worked over the last few years with people that have done, and I have done some consulting with some people in precious metals. But this is a presentation about British Columbia as a whole in 2050, and where we're going and where we are today. But there's sort of a warning sign. So it was really great to hear from Perrin Beatty and what he had to say. So you can look at his presentation as being the 40,000 foot view, and mine's a little bit closer to like the implementation, that down in the weeds statistics. And I really thank him for giving the perspective that he did, because it made me feel a lot better about what I'm going to talk about today. So as we get into thinking about BC, we've got a wide range of different things that we can consider as natural resources. Everything from zinc to gold, wood products, obviously agriculture, trapping, even marijuana. I know it's not legal right now, but that's a $6 billion export industry. And all the way through to like the sun, water, wind, and the people. All of you, all of the citizens, and everyone that lives in British Columbia, which I think is one of the most important natural resources that we have. But really, I want to get into thinking about that global perspective and where we can actually go. So I just want to bring us back and ground us in some thinking around where we could potentially end up. Now, this is taken from an article and a study that was undertaken back in 2012. So it's several years old. But really, it's the idea that in the future, we could actually have over 9 billion people living in this world, generating a GDP 4 times the size of today, and that actually needs 80% more energy. And this particular report said that about 80% of that energy was still going to come from fossil fuels. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, and we'll see my opinion as it builds out through the presentation. But the scary thing was that the locking in of global warming at that point, and to a degree that's actually quite scary, could actually change our living standards. We talked about resources being linked to, good living standards and prosperity. Well, there's a point where it actually changes to actually having a negative effect on how we live our lives. So, we need to really bear in mind this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan says, that we live on. It's a fragile ecosystem, and we all know this. I'm not saying anything new, and we all care about it, and we all know that we've got a responsibility to do things cleaner and better in a way that is very sustainable. So, I like to stop and sort of think at this point. It's like, where are we today? And I'm a technologist, and I've been a technologist for over 20 years. At university, I studied a number of different advancing technologies like artificial intelligence and social network theory, very far before they became actual reality in the practical world. But I like to sort of think about where we came from in terms of, we've got these mobile devices that many of you are holding, or computers, and it came from this guy. This is Doug Engelbart. He was a research scientist at the University of Stanford down in California. And in 1968, he did a demonstration called the Mother of All Demos. And he demonstrated a desktop publishing computer with a trackpad and with a mouse. And this is the very first mouse that he's holding in his hand. It's pretty amazing to think how far we've gone. I mean, who uses mice these days with their computers? Not that many people, right? And then in 2007, Steve Jobs took to the stage and said, we've got something very important to announce. And it was the very first generation iPhone. And that very first generation iPhone morphed into something that was the App Store in 2008. And over 50 billion apps alone on the iTunes Store have been downloaded. The app economy. We all use applications. And we all use applications in a very different way today than we did only 10 years ago. That's an exponential growth. And over 6 billion people in the world have got access to mobile technology. That's more people in the world that have got access to clean running water, which is actually quite an amazing feat. And out of that, 2.5 billion of those are actually smartphones. So people that can do business wherever they are. And they're actually predicting that by 2020, there'll be more tablets and smartphones and other mobile devices sold than desktop PCs. And that's going to be a trend that continues. So we're not going to be sat at desks looking at big screens. We're going to be holding things in our hands, and we're going to be mobile, and we're going to be doing business in a very different way. And to go with that as well, we've got a huge amount of data that's being generated in the world. Over the next few years to 2020, it's actually going to increase tenfold from 4.4 zettabytes to about 44 zettabytes in size, which is pretty incredible. I mean, what do we do with all that data? Why do we generate all that data? Well, there's more connected systems, everything from like mining operations all the way through to the tractors in the fields, all the way through to schools, offices, manufacturing facilities and the such like. And that data can be hugely powerful. And actually, it already has proven to be incredibly powerful indeed. So this is a chart showing the age of technology. And that back in 2006, we saw ExxonMobil, GE, Citigroup, BP, Royal Dutch Shell outnumbering little old Microsoft, the tech company. And now, in only 10 years, the most powerful and profitable companies in the world are tech companies. Sure, we've still got Exxon in the mix there, but within a few, like 2 or 3 years, that's going to be pushed out as well. So Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook are the companies that actually deal with data. And data is the new oil, and data is the new energy that drives the world forward, in a metaphorical sense. And I like to put this slide up as well. These are all American companies. These 7 companies have got a total market value of $2.5 trillion. If this was GDP, that would be the 11th most largest GDP in the world, just behind France. And it will get bigger and probably hit the top 10 within the next year or so. And what's quite interesting about this is that the sheer amount of billions of people that use these services. And with those billions of people using services, we see a huge amount of influence. And that influence makes people change their behaviors and change the way that they consume everything from the communications that happen between their families to the energy that they use every day to how they do their jobs as well. The interesting thing about this group of 7 is that these are all on Trump's tech advisory committee. If you took the total population of these 7 companies and you divided it up by the GDP that we can assume that they could generate, that gives each citizen of this 7 $12.5 million per year in income. It's pretty amazing to think of it in these ways. And the power that we actually have and the growth that has been happening and will continue to happen. But why is this happening? Well, it's something called exponential growth. We're no longer in technology growing by 1 step per year. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's linear. We're growing 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. We're leaping ahead as more people take on the challenges in the world that can be solved with technology, whether it's everything from what we're talking about here to do with natural resources, the extraction, the logistics and everything, all the way through to other businesses that use technology. We're just seeing the changes are exponential, and that growth is going to be seen throughout this presentation as I jump through the slides here. And what's really, really heartening to know is that we are actually taking technology very seriously here in British Columbia. You know, we've got over 92,000 employees, over $26 billion in revenue in 2014, and that's growing every year by 3.3%. And it actually now employs more people than the mining, oil and gas and forestry sectors combined. So we're seeing technology changing the landscape of who we are within British Columbia and the contribution that it makes. But this is an ecosystem that works very well with the natural resources sector. And the natural resources sector relies on these people driving the change within the community. And obviously the government has stepped up with the $100 million tech fund, which is amazing. And I very much look forward to some of the innovations that come out of that. And that's underpinned by the BC Tech strategy as well. So it's well thought through. And this really is the future. But with the advent of all these changes and this power that's coming into our pockets, what does that mean for us? The people that work, the people that build businesses? Well, here's a little history lesson of the power of computing through artificial intelligence. In 1997, Gary Kasparov, this gentleman here with his head in his hands, the chess grandmaster, was beaten by IBM's Deep Blue. He wasn't very happy about that. It was the first time when people looked at computers and got a little bit scared about their potential to replace us. Now, Deep Blue wasn't perfect, but last year, Google had created a computer to play the ancient Chinese game Go, called AlphaGo. And last year, it beat the 9 times world Dan champion grandmaster Lee Sedol. 4 games out of 5, so 4 games to 1. And he actually thanked the computer for letting him win the 1 game. Now, what was really interesting about this computer was it looked at 3,000 years of playing Go, learned every single move. And during the play of these games, the people that were commentating and writing about what was happening, other grandmasters, were saying that at a certain point, this technology became intuitive and creative about what it was doing with the game. This is thousands of times more complicated than chess. And then just before Christmas, this unknown player was playing every single grandmaster in China, and it won 60 games in a row. And then when they revealed who it was AlphaGo again. It had just leveled up in about 9 months. No one could beat it. That's pretty impressive. Learning, intuition, computers, artificial intelligence. This is going to change the world. And then this happened just this week. There was a computer that had been learning how to play poker. But instead of learning every single poker game and every single poker move that had been played in history, it decided to learn it completely from scratch. Sure, it had the reference points of how poker worked in terms of the game mechanics, but what it did was incredible. Over a number of days, it just learned how to be better, to the point that other poker players thought it was actually reading their minds, and no one could beat it. The creativity, the learning, the exponential way that this power actually came to the computer over time is going to be how our world is going to change. And it's hugely powerful for all of us in this room, as well as powerful for business and powerful for governments and society as a whole. We just need to know how to apply it in a way that's going to be very useful. And what's interesting about the advent of something like artificial intelligence is that it now can actually be seen as important as the advent of electricity. So as we know, when electricity came onto the scene, everything changed. Businesses completely changed, the workforce completely changed, how we power our homes, the convenience that came to our lives. And even the world today, as it goes from small mining towns, let's remember that one of the very first towns in the world to have AC was Telluride down in Colorado, right? Up in the Rockies. I've been there, it's amazing. That Nikola Tesla pioneered. And now we can go to any single switch or hole in the wall and charge up all of the devices that we have instantaneously and without cost. But with this AI, there's an advent, and the advent is jobs are going to change. Now, this lovely graphic's about the dead-end jobs below the API. Application programming interfaces, the AI that they work with, the big data that they've got access to, the learning that they can do, will take jobs that are repeatable and simple, and they will remove humans from the equation. And whether that's done with automated programming, or whether that's actually done with machinery that can do the work, you can be sure that the world is changing. And it's not going to look the same in the next 5 years even. Now, today, 2017, we're going to hit around about like rat level intelligence. That doesn't sound too crazy. But exponentially, within 10 or so years, we're going to have intelligence that can replicate the power of the human brain. And then within another 10 to 20 years beyond that, we're going to have computers that are matching the power of every single human brain working together on the planet. This is a huge amount of potential. There's a lot of people scared. Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, it's like, let's be wary about this. Sure. But let's understand that the possibilities are incredible. And this exponential growth, you can see the curve up, is coming. What does that mean for us in Canada? Well, the people over at Brookfield Institute within Ryerson University, great institution, recently did a study and reviewed all of the Canadian jobs that there are, all different categories. And they actually think that within 10 to 20 years, 42% of all Canadian jobs are actually going to be affected by automation and could potentially disappear. And this is something that today we need to think about within this industry and other industries as well. But what's top of the list? The top 5: retail salesperson, administrative assistant, food counter attendant, cashier. And interestingly enough, the truck drivers. Things that don't take a lot of brain power. It's repetitive. It can be done by machines. It can be done using sensors. It can be self-managing. And it was great to see the Honourable James Moore here earlier today. I think he's popped off. But I actually saw him speak a couple of years ago about the Digital Canada 150. And what's great with all these changes that are coming is that Canada's getting ready for the changes and actually helping to build an economy of knowledge within our industries, every single industry in Canada and every single industry within BC, where we can think about how we connect people better, even in the smallest rural communities. We can protect ourselves, we can create new economic opportunities, we can actually bolster government using digital forms, open data and such like, and we can generate Canadian content that gets us onto the world map in terms of progress, innovation, research and development. And then we have to start thinking about how consumption is actually changing as well. So far, a vision of the future, slightly scary, but things are changing. The computers are here. The tech companies are taking control. But then around energy, and I focused this presentation in on this energy part of things. And it's like, okay, oil versus electricity. And we know that this is a conversation that's been had many times over the last couple of days. I certainly had a number of conversations, but we know that a lot of the people that spoke on the stage talked about this change. Well, everyone's pretty much making electric vehicles. Every single car manufacturer in the world. And in fact, by about 2040, they expect about 35% of all vehicles on the road to be electric vehicles. I actually think it's potentially going to be more than that, up into like the 50, maybe even 60% range. But a lot has got to change. But is it changing? Well, what's interesting is the cost of batteries is plummeting down in an exponential curve down to be very, very cheap to actually purchase storage of electricity so that those cars can go further or those trucks can go further. And around about 2023, we're actually going to see a situation where there's an inflection point where the cost of a battery-controlled vehicle, a battery-powered vehicle, I should say, is the same cost as a combustion engine vehicle. And at that point, when people walk onto the forecourts, people are actually going to say, you know what? This makes a lot of sense. But really, come on. Is this disruption really real? Can we really believe these numbers? Well, last year, Elon Musk launched the Model 3 Tesla in the most successful product launch of all time. People were queuing around the block at every single Tesla dealership in the world to order these Model 3s. So they actually took 180,000 orders in 24 hours. That's 180,000 vehicle deposits. And if you actually assumed a value of a standard model with some upgrades that people would want, it's around about $42,000 a vehicle, which is still quite affordable in the scheme of things. So that actually equated to about $7.5 billion in guaranteed sales. And they have to deliver them within 3 years. Now that's not 2023. That's going to hit around about 2020 when the cars roll off of the production line. And with that, we've got the network to fuel them as well. And you just buy a subscription when you buy your car, and you never ever have to buy fuel ever again. These things are all going to lead to exponential change in how we consume energy. And Tesla wants to be the largest car manufacturer in the world by 2020. So 500,000 vehicles rolling off of their production lines, which is pretty amazing. It takes one kind of crackpot genius to think it's a great idea to do this before everyone else. And then to bolt on a space agency as well, right? I kind of love Elon Musk. He's not like now doing the Hyperloop and digging tunnels under LA. I don't know. He's an interesting guy for sure. But what's really interesting about this isn't Tesla. I think Tesla's just taken for granted now. I think it's cool when you see the car, it's like, I want that. He's made a great car. But Ford, what's Ford doing? Well, last week, they came up with a roadmap that takes us to 2020, 2021. And they came up with everything from a fully electric SUV through to hybrid versions of the F-150 and the Mustang. Who would have ever thought you'd buy a Mustang hybrid? It kind of doesn't fit the demographics, right? All the way through to high-volume autonomous vehicles for ride-sharing cooperative cars, taxis, Uber, those kinds of things. And then transit custom plug-in hybrids, and then even police vehicles that are hybrids too. And hybrids are just a step along the way to fully electric vehicles. And the power's there. Amazing. It's an amazing leap forward. And a number of other car manufacturers in the world have been a little bit more conservative. I mean, Toyota are saying that they'll never make combustion vehicles beyond 2050. The pressure from just Tesla and just Ford alone is going to change that immediately in a boardroom. And the decision's already probably been made to bring that forward to 2030. I speculate. But what's interesting about Ford is that they've gone on the record and they're just saying that they're going to sell more electric vehicles than gasoline-powered vehicles within the next 15 years. I kind of find this a little ironic because when Henry Ford put the Model T Ford out on the marketplace, it could equally run as well on electric. Batteries were terrible back then though. Or peanut oil. But obviously, he makes the deal and oil's in abundance and that route's taken. Well, now we're changing. Now, what I actually think is going to happen, and this is going to really start to usher in huge wide-ranging changes, is 2025 to 2030 will usher in wide legislation across many countries to sell only zero-emission vehicles. Everything that using biofuels all the way through to electric as well. And that's to counteract the fact that we could potentially be in a situation where global warming and climate change gets very critical, and we're just really trying to bring that back. And then I look to the airlines. I fly a lot. I feel incredibly guilty about the amount of emissions that go into the air. My carbon footprint is terrible every year. But Alaska Airlines is now using mixed biofuel in parts of its trial. I know across Canada that's happening as well. And what's really interesting is that places like Prince George and rural BC are actually growing the sustainable corn to be turned into biofuels that can be run and burnt off in these aircraft as well. And that's really cool. That's bolstering an economy in different ways. But really going from this world where the consumption has changed into the rise of renewable energy. We know that wind and solar, run of river, all these things are already here, and they're gaining pace. So they actually think that the growth for things like geothermal and biomass is growing by about 7% per year. And that will generate a huge amount of electricity every year, up to 1,000 terawatts per hour by 2025, which is amazing. Now, those growth rates exponentially mean that wind will contribute about 28% of worldwide generation of power, and solar will generate about 66%. This directly contradicts a lot of other studies out there as well, but these are the ones that I subscribe to. I mean, this is all great, but again, we can't just walk in and change exactly how everything happens, right? And this is really important. When I sat down to write this presentation, there's no point in postulating a position for 2050 without trying to get an understanding of how we get there. Because how we get there is how we need to plan changes within our businesses, changes within government, and how society works together. And there's already other countries. So China has been huge on natural resources. It's still going to be huge on natural resources. But the natural resources these days, it's really doubling down and putting its efforts into are around these renewables. And when I heard the Honourable Parampidi talk about what we can take to the world in terms of skills, unfortunately, Canada and America are falling behind in this innovation scale of getting on top of what renewables could be in the world, the machinery, the innovations, the R&D, and we need to think about stepping that up as well. Because China's got 5 of the world's 6 largest solar module manufacturing firms. They've got the largest wind turbine manufacturer, the world's largest lithium ion manufacturer, and the world's largest electrical utility. And they're going to be selling it to the world, and their economy is going to be bolstered by that. And we want some of that as well. So why don't we start thinking about getting into that game a little bit more seriously as well? But what's really interesting about China is that it's actually brokered an agreement with 5 other countries around Asia, and is actually planning to put something together called the Asian Supergrid. The idea that you can generate a huge amount of renewable energy and distribute that in a wide-ranging, multi-country agreement is kind of world-changing in terms of energy consumption and generation. And even companies out in Germany like E.ON has looked at this, and they've taken all of their fossil fuel-based energy businesses and they've spanned them off and rebranded them. And they've said, our core business as E.ON is around renewables. And now they're the 8th largest company in onshore wind in the world. So they generate a huge amount of electricity, and they know that they're changing themselves to be ready for the future. And it's amazing. So what's really interesting about this? So Johannes Taysen, the CEO of E.ON, it's a really interesting documentary on The Economist's YouTube channel. Go try and find it. It's called Disruptors. And he talks about how the management equation of big data and mining and technical competence is something that needs to be managed and something that needs to be built up, and education needs to help support that as new people come into the workforce. And that's going to help build strong companies like E.ON, strong companies like exist in Canada as well, and take us further into this new world of prosperity through energy generation in different ways. Okay, but this is all great. We're still in the realm of in the future we can. Well, how do we get there? And this is where I sort of took my cause on the road, and I chatted to a number of different people about, am I right in thinking this? And I got re-educated in a number of different ways. Well, the renewable and low carbon fuel requirements regulation is working really, really well in BC. Fantastic. May that continue and get even more efficient. Natural gas is going to be incredibly important. It's way cleaner. It's going to be around for a long, long time. So if you work in that industry, we're good. Will you be there in 2050? In some respect. But what would that look like? Maybe a lot less consumption. Hydro, we know. And this is great for British Columbia. And even new fields like nuclear fusion, which is being bolstered by a lot more academic research and companies like this particular one in Burnaby in BC that are building these amazing fusion reactors and trying to drive even more energy for even less nuclear waste in much safer ways. But back to renewables, where are we with that? Well, there's trials in Germany, in Freiburg. There's a group of around about 60 houses that generate more electricity than they use, and they pump it back into the grid. There's this island down in American Samoa that's completely powered by renewable solar energy, and they store all of the power that they need to use when the sun's not shining in batteries provided by Tesla. Then you've got these building frontages in Amsterdam. In Copenhagen, in this Danish school that are being used to actually generate energy just as ambiently as anything else that you can put onto a wall. That's fantastic. And then imagine if every single glass window in the world was actually a solar panel. Well, in MIT, they've actually developed technology to create clear solar panels. a huge amount of efficiency. That's pretty amazing as well. But the sun doesn't always shine. So in very early research, they're developing things called black silicon that can actually have a good efficiency of energy generation when the sun isn't shining. This is amazing as well, and there's going to be huge leaps and bounds going forward. And then that exponential growth. Solar is growing exponentially. And Elon Musk steps up and says, hey, I'm building a gigafactory down in the States where I'm going to build all my cars and all the batteries that I need and everything. And do you know what? If you had another 99 of these and we had 100 in total in the world, we could solve the world's sustainable energy needs. Again, I love the guy. Who's going to step up? These cost a lot of money to build, these factories. And not everyone's going to be on the same page. But you also have to remember that this is an entrepreneur that open sourced all of his patents for his electric vehicles some 3 years ago so that everyone else in the world could benefit from the research that he was actually doing. It's the game changer. And with those game-changing ideas come this exponential growth. And I think we're going to see much more open intellectual property economies opening up around the world. And what's interesting about solar and wind is that it's creating jobs at the rate 12 times more than any other part of the US economy. It's got that potential for Canada as well. So, you know, it's worth taking a look at, and it's worth thinking, oh, today, what can we do to think about walking into that realm? Okay, it's been quite heavy until now, and I thank you for your patience. And now we're going to go really far out, like really, really far out. So I wanted to create a little bit of like light-hearted view of the future. Well, there's lots of people, you know, climate engineers thinking about geoengineering ideas around, you know, ocean fertilization, reflectivity from deserts, pumping things into high clouds so that we can actually create blankets. There's all these ideas. Reflectivity of crops so that we can actually keep the earth cool enough. Doesn't seem so wild. The next idea is pretty wild. And then we can build moon bases. And people are actually working on this, where you can 3D print your own solar panels on the moon and send electricity back. Because obviously there's no atmosphere on the moon and it gets sunshine all the way through the day in a much more powerful form. So people are actually working on this master plan to send electricity back from the moon. Not by 2050, I guarantee you, not by 2050. I'm not putting money on this. And then asteroid mining. This is 16 Psyche. 16 Psyche is a massive asteroid that's not too far away. You know, you can travel to it. You still need to get a rocket up there and all the machinery and everything. But if you've got all of your machinery there, you will find so many precious metals, iron and nickel. It's almost entirely made out of these things. And it's actually worth 13,000 quadrillion Canadian dollars. So when are we going to start a BC asteroid mining company, right? You think I'm joking? There's already asteroid mining companies built getting ready for this. The economic models around the effectiveness of like getting there and getting it back, there's a lot to be worked out. But you know, it's cheaper to launch a rocket today than it has been for many years. I love this story. Quadrillions of dollars, amazing. And then thinking about nuclear energy, because nuclear energy is still going to be around. I already spoke about nuclear fusion. There's still a lot of talk about thorium in the energy community. There's a lot of people that discount it very quickly. It's very difficult to work out how to get the energy from thorium, but if you could, it'll be cleaner, better, more abundant than using uranium and other things today. So I'm kind of excited about that. Okay. The crazy ideas, and there's loads more crazy ideas out there, but they're the ones that I think could actually happen, even the asteroid mining. Maybe by 2100, we'll see some asteroid mining happening. But where's the opportunity for BC in 2050? Well, today we have a huge amount of opportunity. And the Honourable Parent BT did go into this somewhat, and we have to work together, and we have to build the brain trust and the knowledge and the academia and the foundation for how we work as a society. But we can work together in a circular economy where everything from retail to consumption to recycling to design and manufacture can help drive opportunities for growth, reduced waste, greater resource productivity for what we're already extracting today and what we're using today. And we can actually deliver a more competitive economy in BC and beyond. And what does that look like? This is a graphic from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in the UK. And I've spoken at a couple of their conferences that happen every year around innovation. And they talk about this circular economy where we can more powerfully work out what we're taking and putting into the world and how we can make it work for us and a lot better. Because we know that wastage is something that's real, and we know that wastage is a huge opportunity. But what could that mean for British Columbia? Well, we could think about businesses that help us more sustainably produce the products that we need. We can think about operations optimization and R&D around everything we do around maintenance and recycling and technical materials research, around refurbishing and remanufacturing as well. We can think about renewables and biomass research. We can think about R&D in that area as well. And we can think about innovative waste management. Now, this is a way where we look at what we've already got, and we don't necessarily have to even bring more out of the ground. And we can reuse what we've got. And we know that there's some of this, and I've heard some amazing stories over the past couple of days of some businesses that use like waste products from wood, waste products from other different kinds of mining operations to actually create new things that can be of use in the world. But I actually think that the greatest natural resources that we have in British Columbia will be the people that we have living here, the renewables energies that we harvest, and the intellectual property that we generate. We're going to be bound by a purpose to live a great life and to help everyone else in Canada and the world also live like that. This is how we're going to become even greater than we are today. Within British Columbia, we'll be a province with an economy built on innovation across a number of areas, including renewables, energy storage, data infrastructure, healthcare, smart cities, quantum computing, and a number of different areas. What I actually hope is that British Columbia can be seen as one of the very first exponential provinces in the world. And it can be a beacon to Canada and the rest of the world. I think it's got this huge potential here. This is why I live here. I've been living here for 8.5 years and I love it. But what does that look like for like Prince George and other cities around British Columbia? Well, here's some speculations from me of what these could be like in the year 2050. Let's look at Prince George first. So we've got to focus on BC and making British Columbia fantastic. We create an innovative hub for sustainable natural resources, renewable energy generation, storage, R&D, coupled with specialist education and academic centres, very much like the University of Northern British Columbia. You're going to see that as a major financial contributor to the area over the next 20 years. Solar power generation and distribution. And this is what's really interesting. A number of companies, like Facebook, decided to put all of their data operations in places that are naturally colder, because it saved them actually on their electricity bills. So Facebook's got all of its data operations in Finland. What about data operations in northern British Columbia? In places that are naturally cooler, where you're going to need lots of people to help maintain and look after those economies, where we can help global economies get stronger and do data management and these things. Amazing. I love that idea. But what about somewhere a little bigger? I can't just jump straight to Vancouver. That's too easy. So I love going to Kelowna, and I actually love the tech scene in Kelowna. It's burgeoning. There's a great business there. Tourism's huge as well. So Kelowna's going to be Canada focused. How can they make Canada a better country? They're still going to have that innovation hub. They're going to build out technology, the online economy, R&D in those areas. Big company partnerships are going to come in to places like Kelowna. There's going to be educational excellence in progressive subjects, beyond like renewable energy and R&D in that area, into other areas. And they're going to have a lot of solar homes and energy generation there as well. But I live in Vancouver. And I know it's a bit of a bubble. And it's been fantastic coming here to talk to so many people. I grew up in a village of 14,000 people that had a slaughterhouse and had dairy farming. And that's what I grew up with 19 years of my life. So I understand when I come to places like Prince George and other smaller places in Canada that bubble doesn't exist. And that there's a holistic ecosystem where we all rely on each other. And Vancouver's going to have a role that's a little different. It's going to be on the world stage. It's going to be a green city with zero environmental impact, and they're already going that direction. It's going to have educational excellence across multiple disciplines, across multiple institutions. There's going to be innovation centers with international links that are strong. And all of these foundations are being put in place today with BCIC, Vancouver Economic Commission, and a number of other government bodies as well. And it's going to be a programmable city. You're going to have a dashboard of how to control how Vancouver is. The interesting thing about Vancouver is maybe it will graduate to become a world city. Maybe there'll be more financial institutions that come in, more headquarters. I don't think that that's an inevitable future for Vancouver. I think that it's something that could happen. I think that the innovation that's going to come from British Columbia and why I live here is because of that innovation is going to be the thing that bolsters us going forward. And this came out. I wrote this slide during day one as I was watching some of the talks. And the importance of creating a culture of greater individual and business awareness regarding that ecosystem that I just spoke about in British Columbia. That culture of technology, sustainable natural resources, and renewables development, deployment, and operations is going to be something that we're going to have to educate our children and the people that are already in business. And to understand that, you know what? Everyone's got a role to play. Everyone's got a role to play. It's going to be a pluralist society. Every single person, every single company, every single First Nation, Canadian city, province across Canada, districts within British Columbia are going to have to work together. And they're going to have to work together pulling in the same direction because that's going to make us strong. And that strength comes from pluralism. And we're going to have to double down on what it means to have community and a responsibility to every individual and the planet and the ethics to bind all of it together. Everything from policy through to the way that we live our lives. I actually think that 2017 marks the start of a golden era in energy and technology. I think that everything's kind of been a test run up until this point. I think we're now hitting the stride, that exponential growth. We're about to be slingshot into a new era where things are going to get a little strange and it's going to feel uncomfortable. But do you know what? Some people are calling it the fourth industrial revolution. I don't think that term does it justice. I just think that we're going to have an exponential province and it's going to be exponential British Columbia. With this technological growth, we'll need natural resources more than ever. And we'll demand that extraction and processing will be as sustainable, ethical, and clean as possible. This is true. And together, we can work together and we can create that future. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nick, and we will be available to take some questions if anybody have any, so there we go.
Just come up on the screen here. Thank you, Mike. Okay, can you all see the questions on the sides? These have all been voted up. Can I comment on how the BC Tech Fund and BC Tech Trade could fuel growth in the natural resources sector? Well, the BC Tech Fund isn't just like carved off for like cool new businesses and groovy like 21-year-old startup kids to walk in and say, hey, I've got this great idea for an app. It's actually across the province. And the people that are managing it are looking at all the people that are going to be applying, and it's going to be across the whole of British Columbia. How's that going to feed into the natural resources sector? Well, I think it's now time to take some of those good ideas that you've had for a long time and realize that no one else is doing them, and to come up with a business plan and maybe apply for some of this money and to step forward. And also for some of these large organizations to spin off innovation arms of their business, to actually invest more in some things that are a little bit more edgy. and the BC Tech Fund can help them get there. The BC Tech strategy, well, you know, the Ministry of Technology and the government are combining all of their efforts to look at all of British Columbia. So that's my comment on that. I hope that's okay. Next question, yeah. What's one of my worries for the future and one thing that excites you? People always ask me if I'm scared about the future. I'm scared about the people that can drive the future. I think what scares me a little bit is are countries that don't think progressively enough about technology. I think we've got some friends just down south that are starting to make some very stupid decisions. So that worries me. I'll put that as my number one worry right now. I think it's actually going to stifle the growth of America in the long run by focusing on the wrong things. One thing that excites me, some people say like traveling to Mars. I actually think that traveling to Mars is kind of a silly idea. I know why they're doing it, because you innovate a huge amount. Lots of things came from traveling into space. Lots of different applications, glues, freeze-dried food that came from astronauts. But what really excites me, artificial intelligence and what that can actually do in terms of creating a huge amount of insight into the medical health fields. I think that we're going to solve more diseases in the next 10 years than we have done in the previous 500. I think artificial intelligence and open data is going to help us do that. That's the thing that I'm most excited about. Okay, bringing more tech and data to places like Prince George and Kelowna. Do these jobs pay as well as natural resource jobs? Ooh. Well, they should. Because once you build a successful tech business, you're going to be generating revenue, and those revenues are going to go back into salaries. You know, bootstrapping and getting the business off the ground is going to be the tough thing. Yeah, but it's that thing. Why do I work in natural resources? Oh, I can get paid this. But that doesn't last forever, I don't think. I think technology doesn't last forever either. But I think you have to kind of take the leap of faith. Some 23 years ago, my parents sat me down and I was a milkman. I had no qualifications. I sort of left school. I hated school. Hated school. So bad. I didn't like the way they were teaching me. I'm a different thinker, right? That's why I'm here. And they said, what would you like to do? I was like, I'm really good at computers. I'm going to do computers. And it was the right decision. But the first job I had when I moved to London was like £13,000, like $18,000, $19,000. And try living in London for that, you know? So even these other industries are struggling to pay people. Going forward, and I was going to talk about this, salaries are actually going to come down across the board, across a number of different industries. We're going to have to look at solutions like universal basic income to give everyone a standard so that no one's living in poverty. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, and there's going to have to be a lot of retraining. There's actually a study done about 40 years ago in Manitoba, a place called, I'm going to say this wrong, Dolphin. And 40 years ago, they ran an experiment where everyone was paid a certain amount of money per month, standard, not Social Security. It's like, here you go. And they found that people worked harder, they were happier, and they worked longer hours. It was an experiment that ran for 2 years, and then the Canadian government sort of hid it away. And then it was discovered, and there's lots of countries around the world looking at universal basic income as something that provides a standard of living for everyone. Because we've still got poverty in this country and this province that isn't good. And, you know, there's going to be places like Prince George that's going to need that, as well as places in Vancouver and whatever. I live in the downtown east side. It's pretty tough for a lot of people. So will they pay as well? Eventually. Okay, I provide my insight into the future and what will happen. Do you ever reflect back on those predictions and see if your predictions were correct? Yes, I do. I used to do like 1 to 3 year predictions, and it became too easy because I was right a lot of the time. I got mobile payment horribly wrong. I was out about 6 years. Still not working very well. I went to a wedding just before Christmas in Scotland. And over drinks, I bet someone $2,000 that a quarter of the world will be using blockchain technology within 10 years. Yeah, I hope I don't get that one wrong. But yeah, And right now, this year, I've bet that by the end of the year, the iPhone is going to be completely transparent. You're going to be able to hold it up to the world and see an augmented reality. And right now, it looks like I owe my friend a really expensive steak dinner. So yes, I do reflect back. I have to. And there's actually some websites like if you go to longbet.com, I think it's .com, you can actually see some of the world's brightest scientists and futurists putting money down. And whoever wins the bet, that money goes to charity. So go and check that one out. That's pretty interesting. Any more questions? That's it? Yep. I'd like to thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure to be here. I've chatted to many of you. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed myself, and I look forward to coming back to Prince George again. Thank you.